On the other side of the outskirts, 3 people were leading a horse carriage which was covered with white clothes. The skinny man on the left side commented that the road was a mess. The wheel might break if they continue on this bumpy road, and suggested to stop for a second to rest. But the other man who was riding a horse replied that there was no time to waste, and they should move quickly. Inside the carriage, a boy who was about 9 to 10 years old, and a man who seemed to be sick for some reason, lying down on the floor. He asked the kid if he could give him a hand as his head kept banging on the floor. But the boy stared at him without saying anything, and then the kid suddenly kicked his head with his foot. The man's face became pale. He asked what he was trying to do. The kid cut off his speech in the middle and replied arrogantly that he shouldn't be asking that. He should know what exactly he was doing. The man trembled. He wanted to say something, but suddenly the carriage crashed into something, and the man rolled to the edge, while the kid grabbed onto the window. He glanced outside and wondered if something happened. The road was full of blocking stones, so the carriage wheel didn't last long and gave away. Those 3 men became irritated seeing the wheel was completely shattered. The skinny man argued that he had warned them that they needed a break, but the other one countered that taking a break didn't mean the road would become any smoother. The kid glanced out of the window through the curtains. It was not good for him because he was planning something. The 3 men were talking about the drugs that were given to the slaves inside the carriage, and it was time to give them another dose, but the other man said that there was still some time left for that. The kid was eavesdropping. The man sighed, seeing the situation they were in the middle of the woods. Suddenly, the skinny man noticed that someone was approaching. From afar, a man's silhouette was seen. The skinny man wondered if the town was nearby, but the bald one suggested to act normal as possible, because exposing themselves won't do any good. The man from afar was none other than Enid, who was carrying his bag on his shoulder and moving steadily towards them, but had not noticed them yet because he was thinking about other things. He was annoyed because he had to waste so much time on the roads just to get some materials. He swore that the moment he got rich, he would move out from the place he was currently living in. When Ennid reached the carriage, the man waved his hand to get his attention. Ennid noticed that some people were standing in the middle of the road. The bald man asked him if he was from around there, and the skinny one told him that they were just regular merchants on a sales trip. But unfortunately their wagon broke down and they need to get those wheels fixed. So they asked him how far was the nearest town. Enid saw the situation and replied that it was about 30 minutes down the road, and he was also heading in the same direction. The men were overly polite and thanked him. The kid was watching the whole scenario from the curtains, and the man who seemed sick was lying down, feeling pain in his head, making some noise. When Enid passed through the window, he noticed it. He wondered if any sick person was inside the carriage and asked about it to those men. His mind was running continuously because those men were acting suspiciously. If the people inside the carriage were one of them, they shouldn't be hiding them like that, which means those men could be slave merchants. Those men also guessed that Enid had figured out about their identity, and they hate nosy people. The other companion said that they should look on the bright side because Enid was alone and they were higher in numbers. On top of that, Ennid was handsome, which was very good slave material for them. Maybe Ennid should have acted a bit more naive. But anyway, he was becoming nervous and started praying to God. Did he bring any spells potion? He rummaged in his pocket to find something useful potion in this situation. After finding it, he threw it on the ground. Those slave traders were astonished first at him, and then started laughing at what he was trying to pull. But then the bottle on the ground, which was rattling, exploded with boom. The fuzzy air filled the surroundings, and all 3 men fainted on the spot. Enid was lucky that he brought some spells in his pocket. He became happy seeing his spells work. He slapped on their cheeks to check if the spells worked or not. At that moment he heard the same noise from inside the carriage. He went there and slid the curtains to look. The sight he saw made him flinch. A sick man was lying on the floor and a kid holding the window shield. Enid was now very much sure that they were human traffickers. That person and the kid didn't look severely injured. He wondered if they had drugged them. He was still in his thoughts when the kid asked him why he was just standing there. When Enid saw the boy, he was stunned. His mind clicked. He had seen that boy in the mirror. The boy ordered him to open the cage, which was locked from outside. Enid complied and asked him to wait a minute. He started unlocking it while thinking that he was not blindly experimenting. The potion did provide some information about the future. When he opened the gate, Enid wanted to ask the boy if he was okay, but the boy dashed out of the carriage without answering. Enid wondered that it was very strange. The way the boy talked and acted was just like a noble person. Was that why he wasn't paralyzed? He had heard that a lot of nobles are resistant to drugs. However, Enid didn't want to serve him, so he pretended like he knew nothing. He said his name was Enid and asked the boy what was his name. The boy replied that it was Glunn. Then he kicked the bald head and asked Enid if he was the one who took them out. Enid replied in affirmation. Glunn didn't believe him at all and asked how he managed to take them out at once by himself. Enid replied that he had a potion with him that contained spells. He carried them for self-defense, and he is an alchemist. While Glunn was examining those slave traders, Enid was trying to move the sick person from the carriage alone. Glunn asked if they were put to sleep. Enid replied in affirmation, while carrying that person, that they would stay sleeping until they got an antidote, and he was planning to hand them over to town security guards when he would reach there. And then he smirked and told Glunn to take his revenge if he wanted, because now was the only time he could fulfill his wish. Then Glunn raised his foot and stomped on their fingers and broke them brutally. Enid was horrified, seeing that he was breaking all their fingers. He had only imagined that Glunn would only smack them a few times or do something to calm his anger. When he was done, he asked Enid that where he was taking that man. Enid flinched hearing his question, then replied that he was just going to lay him in the shade. Hearing that, Glunn left those men on the ground and stepped towards Enid, and then he grabbed the man's hair and dragged him forcefully. Enid was stunned at first, and then became speechless, seeing that a 10-year-old boy had this much strength to drag a full-grown man. How could he be so strong, and what was his problem? How could he treat a person like that? This was not right, even for a noble. The man's face had become pale. Enid's eyes went wide. The more he saw him, the more off-putting he seemed to be.